Well, hello, this is Dr. Chris Lemmon, and this is July on my little blog piece or chat that I've been doing each month on the concept of teaching, at least from my perspective. How did I, how did I, as a teacher, start to be able to use my skill sets and apply them and spend quite a bit part of my life teaching? Yeah, I mean, I have taught a multitude of things from search and rescue to survival to dancing to martial arts to lots and lots of stuff, firearms, lots of things. So uh, I'd have to say, if I looked at my lifetime, pretty much all of it was implemented in teaching. Doesn't mean I was really a good teacher. It just means that's kind of what I did all my life, right? Teach everything that I got involved in. Next thing I know, I was teaching some aspect of it. Um, and I was, and it's always very comical, and there's millions and millions of stories, and I utilize stories quite a bit. And the reason I utilize stories quite a bit is because all people have similar stories. We're all human. So all this stuff is so similar. It's just amazingly similar. Yes, all the details of stories are a little different, but it's the pattern that we all have life experience, the pattern that we all put together in the same way, the pattern that we stored and build a lot of the same associations, right? And to get that pattern bigger, then I call that range. So to be able to learn a concept or an idea and expand that, then you're gaining range with it. Range means that you now have the ability to make what we call decisions and choices. Up until then, most people in life that I've ever had to deal with were living a life of reaction to something. Something happened, and it was either that reacted, which means unconscious pattern drove it. You got to remember, all your unconscious patterns pretty much are learned and gauged on survival, right? So this is not an educational video. I guess I could go look up all the references that prove all these things, but that's not the point. We're having this little conversation this year, and we're kind of looking at the concept of teaching and how it unfolds, because during my lifetime, I get a lot of questions on that. People will say, "Oh, how'd you come up with that? How'd you make that up?" I'm just danced around them because I wasn't there to teach them that. I was there to teach them something purposeful. So now I'm spending a little time saying, how to put this together. Very much the same way other people put together. All right. So I talked a little bit as we chatted through here. I talked a little bit about the challenges that you run into teaching when people come in. It's like, what are they trying to learn? What are they experiencing? Um, uh, it's easier with hands-on thing. I would do little short workshops like a holiday seasons. Maybe we'd make candles and we'd do beeswax candles and roll them up. Every year it'd be something different. Every year we would do something a little decorative. It's a group of people using their hands, teaming together, having a cup of hot chocolate or cookies or whatever, and interact a little bit. Interaction was really important. So I said kind of my three main, what I call introductory classes. In other words, my ability to present concepts that I thought were of value. People are always looking for, here's a question, where's the answer? And I don't see the life that way. I'm saying life is an experience that you should always be looking at, but you shouldn't be looking at it as if it's just dot, 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 do this, get this, do this, do this. Gosh, that's no range at all. That's just reaction. So range means you get a diverse where you can look at it and say, wow, I could do this and this would be the outcome. I could do this and this would be the outcome. And I could do this and that would be the outcome. Or I could adjust that, or I could take part of this and part of that, or I could allocate some, or I could assign some. Or wow, the bigger the range gets, the more diversity it gets. So being able to play in that range requires that you be the player in a range, right? So I put together some basic implements and concepts to teach short 6-week class, 2 hours, 6 times, 12 weeks, right? That was it. And it had 3 basic classes, and that's where I started out with. Rather than go out and lecture and talk about things that people take notes and write books and that nobody responds to anyhow, for the most part. When I say nobody, I'm talking about majority, right? So I get people that say, oh, I read this and it was profound. Oh, yes, I've read a lot of books, and some of them were profound, and some of them I followed, and some of them I didn't. I wish I could tell you why I didn't do some of them. And now I I learned something new, and I'm messing around with a new concept. And next thing I know, I'm going through notes to make a talk like this, uh, and and I find, oh my goodness, I just thought I learned something, and actually 25 years ago, I taught it as a technique that I learned different words on it, different label, different presentation, but the same concept. I go, wow, that's kind of interesting. I totally forgot. Oh, come on, give me a break. I'm a senior moment, right? So it's okay that I forget. But I had totally forgot that these were the same thing. It's just that they look different because the labels were different. So when we start out, I'm looking at kind of give me a commitment people make. People maybe can make a 6-week commitment once a week for a couple hours if they feel like they're gaining something. So that's where I started. So I did a class that, just a quick review here. I did a class so that they could start to feel energy moving through the body, because we got this strange, I mean, this is an interesting dynamic that it's all designed to keep us alive. It's all packaged for a certain function. It works really, really good. But if we get out there and want to do something different, create an opportunity for potential, we then have to go to risk. If we have to do something not familiar with it, we're going to have to take a risk on doing it. It doesn't mean a risk to life. Maybe it's just a risk for failure. But for some people, failing is like almost dying. You see people, oh my goodness, just get taken down completely, just totally dysfunctional because they messed something up. They did it wrong. They were just didn't have it all together. That's normal, right? So when you start to look at that, I'm looking at like energy flowing through my body. When this stuff fires, energy flows to my body. It would be nice if we could say, yeah, could we feel that in the mitochondria inside our cell when it fires, and we could have a relationship with that? I don't think so, because look how many cells you have, just quadrillions of cells. It's like our brain's not big enough to relate to all that. Not at all. So the information would be totally useless. It would just be what we call noise, right? But we can start to feel energy flowing through our body. Yes, in the very beginning, when I thought this, I would use eons ago when I was 20 some years old, I would use kind of a Buddha meditation method. Would have bring breath into our body and feel the breath flow down through your legs and through your fingertips and out through your toes and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh my goodness. But it seemed like a little strange to me to use that metaphor, because breath is just going in my lungs and not really. So there was this intellectual concept that I was battering through, and so I took lots of different programs, lots of different classes. I found some people that were starting to ground through the body. Valerie Hunt, if anybody knows that name, probably long gone now, but she had some techniques for grounding from the body. A bunch of other people did. Berkeley Psyche Institute did. I got involved with something all the time, constantly, rebirthing everything that came down the pike. Back in the 60s, I was in the midst of playing with, looking at it and sound what was useful and what is just redundant and what is just somebody's BS story and what can we get rid of and how can we trim this down. So I wound up with a concept of being able to connect to the planet, ground your energy, feel that gravity from the energy, feel that's just energy. It's gravity. It's a force. It is a force. So it's energy. So you feel that energy in your body. It affects your body. You get up in the morning and measure your height. At the end of the day, you're a little tiny bit shorter. It affects you every day, right? So there's an effect going on. We start to get a relationship with an effect. We now have a reference to be able to translate experience of movement into something we can relate to, right? Yes, our sensors are on the surface. So if we just use sensory perception, which we do, then it just gives you a surface report. It doesn't really tell you what's going on inside your head, unless you had inside your liver or your stomach. So if you start to look at movement of energy and flow, you start to get more information. Information is not I know. Information is the possibilities that are available to me. I believe that we come into this where a potential expressing itself. Yeah, we're born, yes, with all that biology. Yeah, I read all those books. But the way I look at it, we're an idea imagined, and we come into form. And then the potential that develops, that's just really simple, right? So then developing that potential isn't like we can just make it up, because now it won't come up, it won't show up in structured world, because everything, the breath, the air, the water, everything is structured, including our body. So we have to take these imagined pieces and translate them into some type of structure. Every scientist, every researcher in the world does that. They have ideas, and then they have to make it fit into a testable model so that they can determine whether those ideas have any value or validity to them at all. Most of them don't have a lot of validity. There are a potential, but they won't work in our world. So it doesn't mean that they're not valid. They're valid, just not in form. It's important to remember that, because you should not discount any ideas that come to you because you have to say, oh, it's a dumb idea. No, it's not a dumb idea. Maybe it makes some alterations. Maybe it won't work in our world, but you can utilize that. I used to write down notes. Now I store them all in symbols, but I used to write down tons and tons of notes, and I would dig through notes, and I was able to apply things later in life. And I have read lots of books, other people have done this too, and I'm sure you have. So the first thing is to get a feeling for it. It really needs to be a content in here. It's like, I need to have an association with the world I live in. I need to not run around living in my imagination of how things are going to be. I need to run around imagining things and having a strong association with the world, and have my defense system work for me. So that's why I advocate in my lectures and teaching that we need to be somewhere above 50% in our internal idea of us, somewhere between 50 and 51%, so that we can take and get past the, careful, you could get hurt here, get past the risk and take a chance on a potential in the world and get it out there, and then find out if it fails or not. And if it fails, then adjust it and tweak it so that it works. And that's how potential gets integrated into the world. That's just the nature of it. It's that simple. Okay. But too simple leaves people, nothing to do. That's how they translate it, because they're looking for reaction and not decisions yet. Range is not big enough yet. So we start out with a class that allows them to feel energy movement in the body. I then go to another class that I talked about, and that I called utility. It means that you have value. You're useful. Not only do you do work, people put value in healing, and they don't always put value in their labor. But healing is still labor. It's something you do. It's some influence you have. If I get wood and my tools out and I build a birdhouse, my labor produces a birdhouse. Is that, maybe it's a work of art, maybe it looks horrible, maybe whatever. If I hang it up, birds live in it. Do you understand that's an interface with the world I live in? And I took an idea that I imagined and I put it all together, and I got it up there, and I got birds coming to it. And it's like, now I got a relationship with birds. Yeah, I also have to clean up the mess from the birds, and so on and so forth. But that's all part of the game of living on this planet. That's all part of structure, right? So the second class was to get people to look at the idea, just to entertain the idea that they have some utility, they have some value. They like to think of it, oh my goodness, I lay on hands and you're healed. It's like wonderful. But we do know that laying on of hands, prayer healing, all those kind of things work. We do know that you go see a doctor, and even though all the doctors give you the same pills for a condition, the doctor's attitude, they call it bedside manner. If the doctor's got an attitude, then the pills aren't going to do anything. It's like, really makes you wonder, which is more important. I don't think one's more important. I think they're all part of creating balance. I think we need to have all the pieces in there, right, to be able to create that balance. it's nice because people can't remember to take their pills, and they load an app on their phone, and it beeps and tells them to load their pills. To me, that's a little scary because I don't carry a phone. I really want to depend on me remembering. That's what I want. I don't want the phone remembering for me. But it doesn't mean that AI is bad. It just means that I would like to be 80 years old and remember something rather than be 80 years old and can't remember where my phone is. So I would have no information whatsoever. Those are just simply, that's not a judgment. It's just simply the way you relate to something. Relate to something means you have a preference. Some foods you like, some you don't. Preference, that's all it is. Some people you like, some people you don't. Preference. If you make it a statement about who you are, then it's no longer a preference, then it's arrogance. And you're over that 51%. Do you get how this all shifts? And the third thing I look at is communications, which just means that communication is we bring in information in and we take information out. And how do we communicate that information? Because it's useful. If I imagine an idea and I try it, I'm going to put a roof over top of my patio because my patio roof out there was falling apart when I bought this house. I tore it all down, demoed that, and then built a new one. So there are a lot of different ways to build a roof. Depends how much money you want to put into it, how much resource you want to do it, whether you want to pay someone to come out and do it, or whether you want to do it yourself. So I like to do things myself, not because I'm better than someone, but because I get to learn and my range builds up. So I put up a few patio roofs before. I'm looking at how I'm going to do it. Before I go buy the lumber, I'm talking to a few people I know that are in the business, and they're saying, well, currently there's little widgets and gadgets and stuff that'll make it squarer, make this easier, do that, things that are out that since last time I built a patio roof weren't on the market or I didn't know about them. So I gather some information. So we need to have that communication. So I've already determined that I'm the person. I want to feel the lumber. I want to put that thing together. I want to climb up there and nail that stuff down. I want to put that on there. I want to square it up. I want to measure it. I want to be totally involved in it. I want to be totally engulfed in it. You know, understand that's the first thing. The energy of building it comes to my body. The second thing, it needs to have a utility. I need to put the right type of surface on it, get the effect I want underneath. There's a lot of details involved. I need to look at all those details. I need to put this all together, not to get it right, but so that it brings to me the maximum amount of utility that I can squeeze out of my relationship with it. You see, I'm getting the most I can out of it. And then I simply go into communication and find out all the data pieces that go together, plan this, plan that. And so it's kind of like, oh, okay. So every one of the plans that I had in my head had some speed bumps in it. I call them speed bumps. It's like an adjustment that has to be made. So I look at all of them and I say, well, none are just going to be like throw it up, bam, 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 put it all together. It's like this needs to be adjusted because of the length, because of this. If I got a 4-inch leeway, I don't know if I want to spend the extra money for lumber and then cut off all but 4 inches. And it's like, so do you see how plans come? This is normal stuff that you guys do. Plans come together and you have to make adjustments on it. This is what life is all about. The range is big enough. You can figure it all out. You can put all the adjustments together and you can then put your roof up. And now it sits out there and it covers my pond and it works. It's fine. It's been up there 8-10 years and it hasn't fallen down. And every year I go up and I clean it off and I blah, 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 just a little bit of maintenance. That's normal piece of life. Those are the things we do in integrating ourselves into the experience called life. We can then develop from that. We can get ideas from that. Could I go to work and build patio roofs? No, I don't want to do that. Not at 80. Too much work. But I have got paid to put up roofs already in the past. Different time, different place. I've done a lot of different stuff. So that's just kind of the experience with fun of it. Now, after people have taken the basic programs, they sit there and they go, oh, okay, now I've got some information. I have an idea. I feel some stuff, at least right now. I don't know how long this will all last, but right now I got it. I kind of got this. So now you really want to get them into a program. Now, why a program? You want them to take what they've learned and do it on a regular event schedule so they integrate into their life and use it, right? It's kind of like looking up exercises. Look in the mirror and decide you need to lose weight. Oh my goodness. So you look up food that maybe has less calories. You look at your diet, you look at what you eat. Hopefully you think about all those things. You start to decide that you're going to eat less of this, maybe more of that. You're going to do something different. You go to a gym, you do some exercises. Somebody sits down and maybe writes you up a program so that you got to go back every week for 4 months, 6 months and do these exercises and eat the diet foods and hopefully lose some weight. Okay, so you've got a goal that's a potential for you. You have to then integrate all the pieces of you, your eating habits, your socializing habits. If you go hang out with friends and have 2 or 3 beers and eat 4 bags of potato chips, I'm sorry, that's not going to do well in your diet, I can guarantee you. So all those elements come together. So the package has to be different. And it gets different because we have to change the habit of being, right? Because our habitual piece says, hey, I ate potato chips once, I didn't die, so they're okay. It doesn't say, I see people sit down and get those huge bags of tortilla chips and sit there watching some sports on TV and eat that whole bag. And it's kind of like, oh my God, it just ate 2 pounds of things that's going to take a couple of days to digest in their body. It's like they're going to put weight on. And if they do that every night this week, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a losing battle. And I am just talking about food, but it's all the habits in life. If you smoke, if you drink too much, if you're upset person, if you're a violent person, or if you're a non-violent person and kind of like avoid everything, whatever it is, we've got to get you somewhere in that 50, 51% so that you've got a negotiating space so you can get out of all these habits and start to make decisions, expand potential, get the room to have potential and be able to play with that and develop in your life. Yeah, it's just a game, right? We're just here, right? It's like Monopoly. We get it out, we set it up, we play the game, we put it all back in a box, it's over. So for us, we get it out, we put it all together, we play the game, and when it's all done, hey, we put us in a box and put up a tombstone, it's all over. That's it. So it's just a game. So it doesn't mean that it's not serious. It means that it's not serious, right? It's not serious because I don't care if you get rich or if you get successful, or if you stay poor all your life, you're in the game. They're all going to die. So it's like, so just look what you can do with it, what potential you got, how much you can move the energy and where you can go with it. That's it, right? Now, if you have other ideas, that's fine. But if you have other ideas, you're probably not seeking out information. So you're probably not even listening to this video. So I'm not talking to you, I guess, or you're not listening to me, one or the other. All right. So we set up a pattern. It could be anything. So I started out and I thought, well, first off, we can take anything and anchor it into a pattern. You go to a gym and you got a set of exercises for certain muscles. That's just make up a pattern, right? So I just need a pattern to keep somebody's attention for maybe 6 months, being able to feel energy flowing through their body and give them the idea that that might have some utility. So that might tie to my programs. So I took tarot cards. Tarot cards was originally, the cards were just numbers and it was an Italian game. I mean, how they know that? They find those games, they find instructions, they find all that stuff, right? And so somebody took those cards and thought, oh, I would like to teach some concepts. So I'm going to put pictures on those cards and put together a story to get people to think differently. Okay, cool. No problem. So there it is. So I just have everybody take a deck of cards and every week they come to class and they sit down and they color the picture and they do this and they do that and we do exercises and we do this, that, and the other and whatever. It don't make any difference. The only thing that was important is that they do their exercise. That's it, right? Just like I don't care if you go to the gym and they're playing movies while you're on your bicycle riding in place, right? And watching a movie. That's okay. That's fine. If that motivates you to go do the exercise, then you're doing the exercise. So the tarot cards was a movie to watch while they're doing their exercise. All right. And I even explained to them, it's like we got to do some towards the end of it, we got to say, here are some of the avenues where some of these concepts came from and why they were important and why they tried to integrate these into the cards and into the system of thinking. It's not that they were a lie. It's not that they were, come on, there's right now we live in a world with lots of conspiracy and ideas and everything on. Are those lies? Are the liars the liars? Are the liars the liars? The liars the liars? The liars the liars? Or who's a liar? So it's like it's all disenfranchising. So it's all tearing things apart. So we don't look around for the truth and everybody anchors into the truth because we tried that for thousands of years. That didn't work. So what we really need to do is we need to be able to say, can we get a certain level of functionality in all those different pieces so that every one of them brings some benefit to the table? Now we could get along with somebody doing it differently. As long as it comes out okay, right? That would be fine. It's like I get a recipe online and I look at that and I'm thinking, wow, that's way too complicated. And I will amend it and change it. Yes. Maybe some chef will come along and say, oh, you destroyed my recipe. Oh, horrible. You didn't do this, this, and this. I don't know. I have recipes I've got where other people or even restaurants have made them. And I go, oh, okay. I went on a trip. I used to do a pilgrimage every year. So I take a couple dozen people and we go on a pilgrimage somewhere in the world. Well, once again, another program, right? And so we were in Portugal. And so we spent a couple of weeks over there touring around Portugal. And so when we came back, I put together a party and I said, everybody take their favorite dish from Portugal, whatever that is, and make that dish and bring it. And we'll have a party and we'll be a potluck and everybody will bring a dish that's a memorabilia of Portugal. So if it wasn't something cooked, then maybe it's some bread that you had or some crackers or some snack or whatever. It's all up, but something that you were able to consume and share, we can bring to the social experience. So when I was a kid, I had a lot of tomato soup. My grandmother grew tomatoes and she made tomato soup all the time. I am so done with tomato soup. I don't eat it anymore at all. I'm just totally bored with it. And so we were in Portugal and they made this tomato soup and everybody was loving it, right? Because it was tomato soup, it had beef broth in it, it had a raw egg dumped into it. It was like very, very interesting. I could smell it. I didn't taste it because I don't do tomato soup. So what I did for the event, I made that tomato soup. I just smelled it. So it's like, I saw it. I smelled it. I got it. I figured out the spices. I figured it all out. I put it all together. I brought the tomato soup. There it sits. All these people are sitting here eating it. I said, where'd you find the recipe? This is amazing. It tastes exactly like in Portugal. Am I somebody special? No, I'm not somebody special. I used all those resources that this body brings to the table to put that together. I'm sure if I had the Portuguese name for what that soup was, I could have found a recipe online, but under tomato soup from Portugal, I didn't find anything, at least not in those days. So I put it together. Everybody's having it. And they were all whatever. Now, I go back and talk to those people, and most of them don't remember very much details of the trip. And very few of them remember the party. This is very interesting. I've had communications over the last 10 years with some of those people, and they don't, oh, yeah, that's right. We did do something, didn't we? I can't remember that very much. It's like, wow. So how much range did they have? Right? We had a lot when we were doing the experience, but what happened to it? Do they have more now than what they had before? I can guarantee you they have more now today than they had before. How big did it get? Well, it got bigger, but then after the event was over, it went away. So it started to collapse again, right? You get this? So if we have a conversation, they'll start to remember it. And then that starts to influence their life again. So you start to see when you do anything, it has to become a habit in your life. You have to integrate into your life, and you have to have that all your time, all the way through your life. People come back and say, like, you don't eat lunch? I said, no, I only eat one meal a day. Well, why? Because I don't get hungry. So I eat one meal a day. And my wife goes to visit family or something, visit her mother for a week or so. It's just time with mom. So I stay here. And sometimes I just only eat every other day because I don't get hungry. And, it's like, wow, it's kind of interesting. Is it because I don't want to be fat? Or is it because of, no, I don't get hungry. So why should I eat? So then other people said, I don't understand how you can do that. I said, well, you start to feel the energy in this body. You start to feel what we call metabolism. You start to feel like, am I hungry or am I bored? Am I eating because I don't want to do something? Am I eating because I'm trying to avoid something? Well, there's a lot of things that cause people to eat. If it's hunger, that's another whole story. And if you want to know what hunger feels like, you should read some books on people that have been hungry. Read Viktor Frankl's book when he spent time, and as a Jewish doctor, spent time in a German prison camp back in the 40s. There are a lot of there's a lot of information out there if you dig into it and find out how this works. So we need habit patterns. We need to be conditioned. So we need programs. So I just took Turo and I put together a program. We put together exercises. Now I think that the last writing of that, we call it The Way of the Wizard, right? The names have changed many, many times, depending what the group dynamic was. Even the vehicle itself had changed a couple of times, but Turo's kind of nice to fill out 6 months, and some other pieces we can add to it, and they can get interactive with it. It's fun. So those are the ways that I would put things together. And it's like people come at the end and it said, well, if this is not the secret meaning of life, why are we studying it? It's like, I never told you that we were going to find the secret and meaning of life. I'm just telling you that you need exercise to be able to do the basic things you learned in those 6-week classes. And you would never do any of this if it wouldn't be for me enticing you with some BS story that got us all together and got us to do exercise. And even though the story is a little bit of BS because it's not the original card game that the Italians put together with numbers and no pictures on it, it's still a legitimate reference. It's still legitimate human patterns. There's still a story index that's relative to all humans in the dynamic of the stories attached to those cards. That's it. It's useful. So you start to see from a teacher standpoint, any one of those will flow together. Okay. So there's a program, and when you graduate, we give you a little certificate that says, now you've reached a point where you are a contributor to life. You now hold when you show up, you are adding to. It's an acknowledgement that now you have practice and now you're energy fit, right? Whatever that means. It's like, because that's our reward system is most certainly real in our bodies. And I think that we need to acknowledge that. I just don't think we should reward kids with candy bars. I'm never a Halloween person. But I think most certainly we should acknowledge and reward people. We should acknowledge their accomplishments, and we should do that and work with people all the time. When somebody has something broken, I say, wow, I'll come fix it for you if you help me. And so I get them engaged. So whether I'm fixing a door, or I'm having them hold it, so I put the hinges on, I'm having to do blah, 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 whatever, but I'm having them fully engaged. So that when the whole thing is over, it was my experience, it was their experience. We've got that united we I talked about last week. We're kind of in this together. So people look at the door and they say, look, I fixed the screen door. A friend of mine came over and helped. Okay, cool. That's great. Good story, right? And because it got done. You see, be nice to be able to say, I have got through life. I feel really good about my accomplishments in life. I have lots of friends and lots of people that help me get where I'm at. I'm healthy. I'm well balanced in life. I think this is a wonderful experience. Great. That's what we want. But not what I hear when people come to me. It's like, oh, I don't know what I can do about this. I don't know. What am I going to do? It's like, it's just amusing, right? So that's the idea of putting together programs. So Tarot is one program I put together. Another program I did was what we called kind of like on the healing theme, right? Utility. So they wanted more healing information. So I put a program together where 1 week I'd have a professional come in, maybe an acupuncturist or an MD or some specialty in an MD or somebody doing massage or a chiropractor. Some professional would come in and they do demonstrations. Now they liked that because they thought they might be able to get some customers. So they did that for free, and they'd come in and they would share that with several people, and they probably did get some customers. And then the next week, I would then set them up in pairs and I have them do what part of that was the movement of energy. And I want you to take that person. So here they got a person laying on a table that the chiropractor lift their heels and showed how they were out of balance and had them stand on scales or do whatever else they did. And then the chiropractor would do the adjustments and then they'd be back in balance. I'd have them lay someone on. They'd see they're out of balance. Then they'd do energetically or whatever they were going to do. And then they'd look and it's back in balance again. I wanted them to see that when they put energy into it, that would offer a solution for the person, that would have an influence on the person. Maybe not as long lasting as a professional. I'm not discounting the fact that the professional has more skill sets, most certainly, without a doubt. But I wanted to narrow that gap down so we could widen our range up so we could understand our part of it. And I think that's kind of really important. Can we make a difference to somebody? You know, I can remember one day, my wife and I going to see a lady, and we were just leaving. We were going out to the car, and I hear this kid's crying, and a lady is holding this baby, and she comes running out of her backyard with this baby, and there's blood all over the front of the baby's dress. And I stopped her and I said, "Whoa, what's going on?" And she's just like hysterical. And I'm looking at the little girl, the baby, a little girl, it was a preschooler, and she's got blood running down over her face, and her dress has got blood all over it. And I'd say, hey, look at me. I said, you hurt yourself, huh? Do you feel that? Does it hurt? Okay, could you stop the bleeding for me? We don't need to have any more blood. Just stop the bleeding and take your finger and lift your lip up. I want to see where it's at. Oh, that's not very bad. That'll be easy. So hold that with your finger against your tooth, okay? And just hold that for a second. It'll stop bleeding. It really will. Stop. So relax. Just watch me. And it stopped. And so the little girl is finally relaxing. And I said, do you want me to hold you? And she's looking at her mom. She's looking at me. And then she reaches out to me. So I take her and I've got her holding here. And we're having a talk. And I'm brushing her hair back. And I said, you know, this lady here is your neighbor. I don't know if you know her. She's going to take you in the house and clean you up a little bit and wash you down, get some of that blood off so you don't look so messy, you know. We're not going to wash your dress. So mom's going to do that. But one is to clean up your face a little bit and have a chance for you to look in the mirror. And you'll see that's just a little tiny scratch. It's not a big thing. That you just fell down and probably hit your tooth. So it's not a big deal. No, it's not. Don't worry about it. And so I give her and she takes it in, and I'm looking at the lady who's now just panicky. And now I'm working on utility for the lady to get rid of this panic. So I'm talking to her, I'm telling her everything's okay. I'm relaxing her a little bit and having her look at me, and we're kind of calming each other down, and we're having an influence, you know. And of course, my wife went with the other woman in to take the child, and so we got them separated so that, you know, and then the lady was calming down. And finally, she got calm and relaxed, and they came back out. And I said, "So your baby's fine. You should get her out of that dress and put her into something different, so she's not looking at the blood, so she's not all panicky again. It'll take a little while to heal, and if it starts bleeding again, you may have to take her in and have someone put a little something in there. But I don't think it's going to take a stitch. So I think as long as you could even put a Band-Aid across there, it would keep it from stretching, and it might be beneficial." I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm just giving her some information. I said, "So do you work? What do you, as a mom, do you work?" And she said, "Yes, I'm a nurse," she said. And at that moment, I'm just like speechless. She's a nurse. It's like, wow, that's interesting. So I said, "Well, I'm a doctor." And she goes, "Oh." I said, "So this worked out really good. You got a doctor that took care of it, and now you're a nurse, and you're going to nurse her back to health. Magic formula. This is a perfect setup for everything working out good." And she says, "Oh, well, thank you, doctor." And she took her kid and went away, and was like, whatever. You get this? It what what happened to range when the kid get hurt? Here's a woman that would know, and all of a sudden she lost her range. It all collapsed. She couldn't figure out what to do. She's all panicky. And of course, then the kid was panicky. By the time the kid's coming out, it's walking. You know, somebody's holding the kid's hand. It's like, "I'm fine. I'm okay." And then she came by and hugged me and thanked me. And then she went with her mom. Hey, you, you see, being able to make decisions comes when you have range out there, when you practice a little bit. Not that my story was totally true, but it wasn't an idea to impart the truth. The idea was to be able to have an influence. If there would have been a big open gash or a broken tooth, then it would have been a different scenario. Then it might have been somebody taking a kid to the hospital, right? Or to a dentist or somewhere, right? The tooth was broken. I would have gone to a dentist. Dentist would have put a stitch in there. I remember being at a party one time and somebody broke a wine glass and it cut their lip, and the guy sitting next to me was a dentist, and he just reached in his bag and he sat there at the table and put a stitch in there. Can you believe that? At a dinner, he just put a stitch in there. He was so cool and collected about it that it got nobody's attention. He managed it so well. I was so impressed. It's like, boy, this guy is really good. It's really good. He stopped that bleeding, looked for glass, got that out, did that, sat there in a chair right next to the lady and put that all together, you know, and then called the waiter over and said, "There's a little blood on this." You know, she cut her lip. So, you know, give me another cloth. And he brought another napkin out, and it's like, and the dinner went on. It didn't disrupt anything. It was just so calm because of the range, the discipline he had, the range, the skill sets, manages the whole. There's a room with 50 people, and it's just like it was calm and collected. So that comes from a practice. So I put together programs for practice, right? So people said, "Oh, what happened to the curriculum to that?" The curriculum wasn't really important. The practice was what was important, right? Just set up a practice for you or go take someone's program. Is one better than the other? I doubt it. As long as you don't buy into somebody's story and then all of a sudden you narrow your range down and everything's got to be a certain way, well, then you got nothing out of the practice, nothing whatsoever. So another one that, like I said, I had all these playing with utility, and then let me turn my phone off. I had a phone call this morning, so normally my phone's unplugged, and I plug my phone in for a phone call, and so now I've got the same burden that all you guys have out there. Your phone rings all the time. My phone's normally unplugged all the time, and so I have to. That's why I tell people, you got to email me because my phone's not going to ring. I just made a liar of myself. My phone's not going to ring, and so that one is just rang. All right. So another avenue of a program that I had put together was we would play a little bit with intuition and pictures, and and somebody has tenacity for calling me. I think that one of my students' mother just passed. So anyway, that's the hit I get. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that because I'm talking about an intuition program. So people come back and they say, well, could you tell us how you read things in people? How do you see pictures? How do you see patterns in people? And um, and for the most part, it's like that's really not all that complicated. We just naturally do that. But our problem is, for most time, is that we start to think in terms of, okay, we think in terms of my experience with it rather than someone else's experience with it, right? And so all you're really learning in an intuition program is you say, wow, I can see, I can feel, right? See is a little bit misnomer. We use the word see, but really it's just sensory data, right? So the word see becomes common because the part of our brain that has to do with visual is the largest part of our brain. The section for sensory perception is the biggest for visual. But what we do know from science is that if we put blindfolds on you for a week and we have you work with a blindfold, someone has to be with you to feed you and take care of you, but you wear a blindfold for a week, the back of your brain that's visual will start to expand out and start to get more sensory touch areas into it in a week's time. So it's so plastic and adaptable. It's amazing, right? So when we start to say we see something, we don't see something, we have a perception of something. Once again, we feel that. We feel like I'm in training with that person. And I think I talked about entrainment. I'm in training with that person. So now I'm getting a sense of feeling of this is me and this is them, two feelings, and I'm different. So when I look at that, I said, oh, that I could say that feels like I felt when I fell out of a tree when I was a little kid. But that would have been my experience. So I have to be able to say, well, in my head, I have to say the picture in that was familiar picture in that was me falling out of a tree. But that's really narrow range. That requires a tree and an event and a place and time. But what could be bigger than that? Well, what could be bigger than that is to be confident about something and have it fail. Like I was very confident I could climb that tree. And like I thought that branch would hold me and it broke and it didn't hold me, or I slipped with my hand, or I got distracted and just leaned back too far. Oh, whatever. I fell out of the tree. So it was a process of confidence, overconfidence. It's that 50-51% piece again, right? So I said, So for her, it's something similar. It's in that 50-51% dilemma is where it sits. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so if that's where it sits, then all I have to do is say, what is her experience in it? Like a symbol, an assignment, right? I said you can put something in a symbol and ask it a question. Now she becomes a symbol for something. I now have a range so I can form a question. And now she has a symbol and I'm asking a range of questions, something unique. And the next thing I know, I get an impulse. And maybe that impulse is all of a sudden I see a little girl standing there just totally frightened, totally in fear. Like, wow, that's interesting. I can feel the fear. And I go, wow, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. And then I say, expand it out. Show me a little more. What are you afraid of? What's going on? Right. I don't say that verbally. I I just have that reference. And so as I express that reference, the next thing that starts to materialize in there is I start to see a mess on the floor, some eggs. Okay, so she was putting eggs away. She spilled the eggs on the floor. They broke. She panicked, got back, knew she was going to be in trouble, totally froze up. So she's having an experience as a kid, not at 50 or 51%. So now all of a sudden it's defensive. I'm now going to get in trouble. That's my life is now there's a threat to my life. No, it's not really a threat. Mom's not going to kill her over eggs, but she'll get punished and it'll be who knows what. And maybe mom is very volatile. So might scream and holler or whatever. But nonetheless, that's at that age, she shouldn't have been 50%. She should not have been. She probably wasn't. So you start to see those are real pictures. So I could easily say, oh, so you've got a challenge with authority because at some point in time you broke some eggs, mom yelled at you, and now it's like you think everybody's going to be screaming and hollering at you. And so you're afraid of doing anything wrong. So you're afraid of doing anything. And she goes, oh my goodness, you're a good reader. Oh, come on. That do you understand how this works? This is really very, very simple. It's just not, it takes a little practice because for the first 3 or 4 months, all you're getting is your experience. It takes a couple of months to get the entrainment, to practice the entrainment down. So I put together a 6-month program and they come in and they sit in front of someone and they were reading and I got a few flight chairs to make them comfortable. And in no time whatsoever, they're doing readings. Okay, not a problem. So then we lay, how are professional psychics work? Well, I've had a lot of professional psychics come in and say to me, oh, all of a sudden I've lost, my guide went away, or this is not happening, or such and such occurred, and now I don't see anything anymore. And so then I'm spending a little bit of time getting rid of whatever block, whatever they put between them and the ability to do that as a critical step is now no longer functional. In other words, their ranges open up and now they could do it without the baby steps. It's like a bicycle with those training wheels. At some point in time, you can't go any faster and you can't maneuver on turns and you can't keep up with everyone else because the training wheels come off and you can ride with the bigger kids. So she needs to get rid of the training wheels. And so I've had lots of people come in and say, I just go blank. I can't do this anymore. And I just work with them a little bit and we get the training wheels off and the range opens up a little bit. And there it goes. And I don't know how many people have brought recordings in. There's an event and 5 people find a psychic at a psychic fair that's really personable and they go spend a couple $100 and get a reading, and then they bring the recordings in and they're asking me, what do I think of the recordings? And I listen to the recordings. This person's saying the same thing for all 5 people. They're not even paying it. They're not even trained with the person. They might be in trained with current affairs, what's bothering all people, but they're not in train. In college, I was with 2 girls and another guy. So the 4 of us were just friends. And we just went out, got something to eat, and we were back. And one of the girls was driving and she saw a neon sign, psychic, in Southern California somewhere. And so we whipped in there and we're all going to go get a reading. So the 3 of them got a reading first. I was the last one. I wasn't going to do it, but I went in. So I went down in and I sat with this lady and she sat and she said to me, she looked at me, she said, oh, she said, you're very different than your friends. I said, well, yeah, probably. And she said, there's numbers all around you. What is that? I said, well, I manage a grocery store, so it is kind of all numbers around me. And she says, oh, and she asked me a whole bunch of questions. And then we just had a general conversation about the meaning of life. you know. And then she said to me, what do you think if someone's dealing with a problem? How do they adjust? What's right? I said, well, there's two things going on. Number one, what feels like it's right. And number two, what the consequences are. I think when you start to think about what is right, you also have to think about what the consequences are. And so those two things go together. But when you're in the midst of it, sometimes you forget about consequences. So you do something right, and then later on it doesn't work out real good because there was consequences you didn't look at. So it has to have a bigger range, is what I told her. I was freshman in college. And so we left. And we stopped at a coffee shop, and they all wanted to talk about their reading, and they all had the typical neon psychic reading, oh, you're going to get rich, or you're going to become famous, or you're blah, 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 whatever. And they're all talking, and I'm sitting there in silence. And it's kind of like, oh, and how was yours? And I said, yeah, pretty much the same as yours. I realized at that point, it's like, I didn't get the same reading. I didn't get the same reading because I didn't go in with that expectation of somebody's going to tell me a fairy tale and I'm going to be delighted because, I was a disciple of Christ or past life or some crap like that. It's like we just had a legitimate conversation about life in general. And I did find out about a month later, her sister in a foreign country under persecution, Romania or someplace like that, sent her daughter over to live with this lady in America. She couldn't get out of the country, but she sent her daughter over. And so the woman here in America sent money over to her sister to buy the airplane ticket to get her daughter out of there because they were starving, conditions were really bad. Well, somebody, because she was a neon psychic, was monitoring her communications. And so they actually were trying to prosecute her for paying for a child, buying a child. That's what they were trying to get her for, because she had sent money over, blah, 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 blah. All this stuff gets recorded in exchange rates and international phone calls. And so it was really kind of interesting. When finally got to court and said, this is my sister's daughter. Her husband is dead. She is starving to death and she's sick. She can't take care of the daughter. She sent her to me and I paid for the airplane ticket. And then the judge just threw it out of court. But it took about 6 months of prosecution. They arrested her, they booked her, they had to release her. It's just kind of amazing. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you all this because it was the same thing I just said. You have to look at the consequences. She asked me a question and I told her you have to look at the consequences. She was deciding whether she wanted to take the little girl. They have no children, her husband. So it's a lifestyle. And she was like maybe 50 years old. So I don't know. It's really a tough adjustment to take a kid. Would I do it? Yes, without a doubt, I would do it, truthfully. And I would have to really map into what the consequence before I would do it. I was telling her to look at the consequences. I think that she got documentation for everything. I think that's how she got clear of that. If she would have just been laissez-faire and sent a money order or something, I don't know how it would have worked out. So she had the whole thing covered. She wrote reasons on everything for it. For an airplane ticket, she wrote on the money order. And all that showed up in court. And it was a good thing that she had copies of all that. So it got her out of trouble. So there's always consequences. So when you start to look at these things, it's not always just, yes, it's a phenomena. There's no doubt about it's a phenomena. It's most certainly not logical. It's not something, it takes just a little practice. Can we do that? Yes, we can, because we're so close together. Human, we relate really, really good. We really do. We have very similar experiences or can imagine similar experiences so easily. It's unbelievable. So I promise not to go on and ever and on. I talk too much. So I'm going to shut up at this point. But any questions? I just kind of introduced the idea of why programs are, why we do longer programs, what the intent was to doing longer programs. It's just simply the same as going to the gym. Here's your exercise routine. Come in every Tuesday and Thursday and do these exercises, blah, 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 blah. Or here's the medication, take these pills for 10 days. You start to see we've got a habit of living. To change the habit of living, we got to change our habit. And we need a protocol to change our habit. And that's why all those classes out there, for whatever the topic are, is to change the habit of your being. So, and that's the nature of it. So once again, any questions, go ahead and send them to Chris at wizardscat.com. I'd be glad to answer your questions. I will actually turn my phone back on and call this lady back. But the email comes in handy, because otherwise my phone will be off. And so thank you very much. And this has been a fun adventure, and we'll talk again soon.